A warm welcome to everybody who has joined us this morning. A very topic that we are going to be covering this morning. We are going to be discussing the basic package of support for young people. It is the second webinar that we are hosting on this particular topic, but we thought it was important to share with you the learning that is coming out as we make progress on this very important initiative. You might or might not know the Southern Africa Labour and Development Research Unit, SALDRU, at UCT, the Centre for Social Development in Africa at UJ, and the DG Murray Trust continue to work on the basic package of support for youth and are assisting thousands of young people in finding their way back to work and education opportunities, as well as available support services. This webinar will discuss the latest findings and progress against the objective of establishing an ecosystem of support for young people as they navigate the transition from school into income earning opportunities. We will post the presentation after the webinar. Your mics have been muted and will be unmuted during question time. We encourage you, however, to post questions in the chat, and we will try and answer it real time throughout the webinar, but we also encourage you to share insights. This is a broad community of practice. I think by virtue of your participation in the session, it is a clear indication that this is an area of interest and probably also an interest of experience. And so we are very happy for you to share your insights as we move along through this webinar. We also would like to encourage you to complete our evaluation of the webinar at the end of the session. I think that, you know, as South Africa, given everything that happens in our country, it is so important to have a sense of hope. And for me, this particular intervention that has been happening and has been piloted over a number of years now is something that gives hope to young people in our country. And so it gives me great pleasure to introduce Ariane and Lauren, women who are led by their passion for improving the lives of young people. It has been an absolute privilege working with them and learning together. Lauren is the director of the Centre for Social Development in Africa at the University of Johannesburg. She is a development sociologist with a passion for developing and testing evidence-based programs that promote the agency and resilience of excluded groups. Although her work engages with children, youth, and people with disabilities, she is particularly interested in how we unlock the incredible potential of the young people of South Africa. She has a strong expertise in evaluation research and is skilled in the use of both quantitative and qualitative research approaches. She is particularly interested in the use of research methods that give voice to vulnerable groups. Ariane is Chief Researcher at SALDRU, Southern Africa Labour and Development Research Unit. Her work involves developing and coordinating a youth focus within the existing Poverty and Inequality Initiative of the University of Cape Town. Prior to joining SALDRU, she worked as a Senior Research Officer at the Children's Institute of UCT for 5 years. Ariane holds a PhD in Sociology from UCT, and her dissertation looked at educational decision-making in the area of AIDS. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can assure you, you are in good company this morning. And so, without wasting any more of your time, let me hand you over to Ariane and Lauren. Thank you. Well, maybe they don't want me quite to hand them over, right? But perhaps we want to go on to the next slide. I'm supposed to say something about the Jobs Fund, but I'm so excited to get into the substance of this morning's webinar. You know, so let me just say, in respect of the Jobs Fund, it was established as a way for government to pilot and test and share risk with the private sector and others to uncover innovative solutions for unemployment in South Africa. We work with intermediaries and we leverage their networks. One of the foundational pillars, though, of the Jobs Fund is to share what we've learned over a number of years, to share what we've learned in respect of the interventions where we have partnered with others, and to provide a platform for our partners also to share their learning. And this really is what we are doing here this morning. Next slide, please. Right, so now I really can hand over to Ariane and Lauren. Ariane, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Just very quickly popping my camera on so I can say good morning to you. I think Lauren will probably very quickly do the same. Thanks so much. I'm going to switch my camera back off so that we keep the connection as stable as we can. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here today. We are extremely excited to share the lessons and findings of just over 18 months of piloting implementation of the basic package of support for young people who are not in education, employment, or training. Before we get started, though, I would like to extend a huge thank you, firstly, to the different site teams that are out there in the different communities and who are making all of this a reality. They have taught us and continue to teach us a million things about what is and isn't working for young people out there in the trenches, really. A huge thank you also to the hundreds of young people who are walking their coaching journeys and finding ways to reconnect to learning and earning pathways. To our small, very small, but very fierce team of qualitative and quantitative researchers who've crunched all kinds of data to allow us to put this presentation together for today, a huge thank you. Obviously, an enormous thank you to our partners and our funders for being our biggest champions, and in particular today to Najwah and the Jobs Fund for inviting us to give this presentation. Thank you so much. Lauren and I are the ones presenting today, but our colleague Simon Penke is in the audience and is very much here as one of the representatives of the Basic Package of Support Consortium. We run this entire endeavor collaboratively, and she'll be keeping an eye on questions that you may be posting in the chat, and we'll be taking turns in trying to respond when we're not presenting. Okay, let's dive straight in. Lauren, next slide. I think that's right. Hey, I was supposed to dive into the next slide. Just a quick step back to remind us all of why we're doing what we're doing. We're looking at over 3 million young people who are not in education, employment, or training in South Africa. That's young people between the ages of 15 to 24. If we were to extend that to the official South African definition of youth up to 35, we'd be looking at over 9 million young people who are out of the education system and out of the labor market. What that graph on the right-hand side there shows you is that that is a problem that has been steadily increasing over the last decade. SALDRU runs an annual analysis of what this cohort of young people looks like and how things might be changing. You can see there from 2013 to 2023, a steady increase with a slightly higher number of young women affected than young men. What this means is that despite multiple state and non-state interventions, we haven't really been able to change the dial on this situation. And what's important to keep in mind when we think about possible solutions to support this cohort of young people is that we're looking at young people who face multiple challenges all at the same time. They're not only out of the schooling system or out of the labor market. When we look at general household survey data, we saw that in 2021, which obviously was a slightly different picture because of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw that close to 70% of these young people were living in households below the upper bound income poverty line. What this means is households with only just over 1,300 Rand per person per month. 1,300 Rand per person per month. The combination of being out of school, out of the labor market, and living in income poverty on its own means that there are barriers that continue to reinforce one another. It will be more difficult for these young people to look for work, to attend interviews, to attend training and education, because that requires resources. We're often asked who these young people are and why they are not taking up particular opportunities. So we also run an annual analysis. We use the quarterly labor force survey data to provide you with a little bit more understanding of who these young people are. One question we also often get is why they're not looking for work. So you can see here we're looking at the cohort of 3.4 young people between the ages of 15 to 24. And what we see is that the majority of them, 50% or 49%, are, so almost half of them, are searching unemployed. It means they indicate in the surveys that they are willing to work, available to work, and they are actively looking for work. An additional 20% are discouraged job seekers, which means they are available to work, they are willing to work, but they have given up looking for work. So close to 70% of young people who are not in education, employment, or training have an orientation towards the labor market, indicate that they want to work, but some of them may have given up looking for work. What we see when we look at the analysis over time, so you can see there the 2013 data alongside of the 2023 data, is a decrease in that discouragement. Hold on a second, Lauren, you're going too fast. A decrease in the levels of discouragement from 2022 to 2023, which was a statistically significant decrease, and an increase in searching unemployed young people. So more young people are actively looking for work, and we'll talk a little bit later on that that doesn't necessarily mean that discouragement or lack of hope has disappeared among these young people. We also see almost 31% of young people who are inactive, and when we look at the reasons for that inactivity, we see that that is mostly driven by caregiving responsibilities and health concerns. The majority of these young people live in urban areas. So there's the next click, Lauren. There we go. Which is often a little bit surprising because people think of young people who are disconnected from systems as those who are living in more remote, potentially rural areas. But in fact, at a national level, close to 60% are living in urban areas. The majority of them fall into that slightly higher age category of 20 to 24. And importantly, the majority of them are out of the education system and out of the labor market with a matric, and then the other 47% with less than a matric. That is a really significant and slightly worrying, not just slightly worrying, trend that has been changing over the past decade. In 2013, we saw that the majority of them were out of the education system and labor market with less than a matric. We are beginning to wonder now whether the trends that we're seeing there indicates potentially that matric is losing its protective power for young people in the labor market, which would mean that it would become even more difficult for them to connect to to job opportunities. Next slide, please, Lauren. Or next click. Yeah, what's important to keep in mind, there we go, is that of these young people who are not in education, employment, or training and looking for work, almost 80% are new entrants to the labor market. This means they have never worked before. That doesn't mean they are recent new entrants to the labor market. New slide, Lauren. When we look at those who are searching unemployed and new entrants into the labor market, we see a very concerning trend there that the majority of these young people have been looking for work for more than a year. And looking at those who've been looking for work for more than 3 years, you can see that that is over 42%. That is a worrying trend, and you can see that the proportion who's been looking for work for more than 5 years has almost doubled over the last decade. So we're looking at a group of young people that indicates the majority of whom indicate they want to work. Some have given up looking for work, and large numbers of them have been looking for work for extended periods of time. What this shows us is the absolute resilience of young people to continue to try and gain access to a labor market that is really not very welcoming to them. Next slide, please, Lauren. What this also means is that young people find themselves trapped in this kind of vicious cycle of socioeconomic exclusion that ultimately feeds higher levels of stress, higher levels of mental ill health, which in turn make it really difficult for them to take up opportunities even when they would become available. This is a cycle that's been recognized by our colleagues in psychology and psychiatry, and that really indicate this kind of social drift that originates from long-term socioeconomic exclusion. Basic package of support, therefore, puts forward a proposal that aims to interfere in this vicious cycle at various points in time and through addressing various barriers that originate in this vicious cycle. Next slide, Lauren, and I think that's over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think Ariane has given a really good explanation of the complexity of the problem that we're dealing with. But essentially, in one statement, we can see that young people growing up in situations of poverty face multiple deprivations as they seek to transition to learning and earning. These deprivations create additional barriers to finding and being able to stick with learning and earning opportunities, and can lead to discouragement, poor mental health and well-being, and social drift in the longer term. So the basic package of support intervention is a two-pronged approach. We work at the interface with young people themselves through a coaching program, which I'll give a little bit more detail about, and then a community of practice approach where we work with local community service providers to improve the connections between these service providers so that young people are no longer falling through the cracks. To give a little bit more detail, the youth-facing intervention proactively reaches out to young people between the ages of 18 and 25 years who are NEET. When we say proactively reach out, we have peer-to-peer mobilizers who actively go out into the community to find these young people, because what we find is that these are often young people who, despite their resilience, also face that sense of discouragement, and are therefore not likely to walk through the door themselves necessarily, and need somebody to convince them that this is something that can help them, which is why we call it proactive outreach. They're then connected with a trained youth coach. We work with child and youth care workers who are then trained up to become youth coaches. And the coaches then provide customized guidance, working with that young person to understand what is their current situation, their household situation, their income situation, where do they want to go, and what are the barriers that are on their way there, how can they overcome those barriers. The youth coaches then work with the young people to connect them to services and opportunities, services that can help them to overcome those barriers in their lives, and opportunities that are best suited to their longer term plan. So it's not about placing any young person into any job. It's about figuring out what is the best step for you on your journey to your longer term plan. And then there's an opportunity to follow up and continue to support those young people as they plan their next steps, and we'll talk about some of that a little bit later. But we often get asked, how long is the program? When do young people exit the program? There is no exit point. The coaches remain available to young people even after they have taken up an opportunity, because we know that even if they're able to take up an opportunity, the barriers that they face in their lives don't automatically go away and can create further obstacles to them being able to stick with that opportunity. And sometimes they just need to pick up the phone to their coach and say, I'm really struggling with this, I want to give up. And their coach just gives them that little bit of boost to help them continue on their way. If we're referring young people to these services and opportunities, and these young people are getting turned away by these services and opportunities, then we've really shifted nothing. And so the second element of the BPS is our local community of practice process, where we work with local service providers. We bring them together to begin to understand the multiplicity of young people's needs, to problem solve with the local service providers so that we're able to improve service delivery to young people, and that we're able to better promote better coordination and articulation between services. So if there is a particular service that a young person tries to access And that, let's say they go to the clinic in a situation of trauma and the clinic's not able to help them, the door isn't simply closed. The clinic practitioner can say to them, I can't help you, we can't help you, but the right place to go to is here, and I'm going to connect you with that person, so that there are no longer these closed doors that young people talk about constantly facing. And this in time should ensure that young people are not falling through the cracks of service delivery in communities. So the key outputs in our theory of change are that young people are firstly reached and connect with the program, that they're connected with a coach and receive that customized support, they're developing an action plan with their coach, and they're referred to relevant services and opportunities, and that local service providers are regularly engaging in the community of practice activities, beginning to shift their perceptions about young people and their challenges, and understanding that they have a role to play in supporting transitions. When we presented about a year ago, we reported mainly on these outputs with a little bit of insight into what we were starting to see come out of our, in terms of our outcomes. Today, we're really going to focus on the key outcomes for young people, not so much on the community of practice, but because we had to really focus it. So we're going to be focusing on the outcomes for young people. And we've got three main outcomes. The first is that young people feel supported, that they're more resilient, that they show improved well-being and orientation to opportunity, that they understand and have access to services that help them overcome barriers, and that they connect with and stick to learning and earning opportunities. Our approach to the monitoring, evaluation, reflection, and learning is that we've had a mixed methods approach. In the first instance, the focus was on exploring whether it's possible to implement the different building blocks. So that's really monitoring and checking that our outputs were being achieved. In the second instance, which is what we're focusing on today, it's really to explore whether the program is able to shift the situation and well-being of young people who take part in the individualized coaching sessions over an extended period of time. And we do that in two ways. We collect quantitative data. We invite all young people who sign up to the BPS, and at the moment we're just under 1,500 young people, to complete a pre-session 1 survey. They don't have to complete it, but we encourage them to. And then we have a short survey after each of their coaching sessions where we look at any shifts that have happened. And then we've got ongoing standardized qualitative data collection across the site that happens 8 months after the site opens and again 6 months later. And there we have a randomly sampled selection of young people. So it's not that we're picking the ones who are going to give us the good stories. We really do randomly sample. And what we're seeing in the qualitative data, as you'll see as we present, is that we're seeing a consistency in the stories that are being told. So this is not anecdotal data. This is really robust qualitative data. So we've looked at NEET youth who move through the coaching sessions, those who take up learning and earning opportunities, and then what we've tried to do as well is to probe into those young people who become inactive. And what we mean there is they may have paused their coaching session because they've taken up an opportunity, or they've become uncontactable. We really try and probe and figure out what's going on with those young people too. And then we also explore whether the program is able to invite local service providers into the community of practice to support and facilitate processes of collaborative problem solving. We won't present on that today, but we do have some learning briefs that will come out about that later this year. We've been implementing the basic package of support since February last year. We started in Atlantis, in the Western Cape, and then Orange Farm. Our third direct implementation site is in eThekwini in Cato Manor, and then we have 3 partnership implementation sites in Alexandra, Jabulani, and very recently in partnership with Bombengomso in Mdantsane in the Eastern Cape. I'm going to hand back over then to Ariane.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Lauren. So who is currently in the basic package of support cohort? We ask, as Lauren says, we ask young people to complete a pre-session 1 survey, which is where we gather our baseline data. What we see there is that the majority of young people who complete that pre-session 1 survey, sorry, I'm getting a little bit stuck there, are young women. 62% of them, alongside of 38% of young men, which is not unlike many of the socioeconomic interventions and even health oriented interventions we see across the country. It's a similar trend there, with more young women taking up the opportunity than young men. We spoke earlier about young people who are not in education, employment or training and the levels of education that they have. What we see is that there's a slightly higher, well, no, not a slightly, there is a higher proportion of young people taking up the pre-session 1 survey, and so assuming the coaching trajectory, that have either a matric or some post-school education or training. That was a little bit of a surprise, I think, to us, because we had assumed that the program would also be able to attract higher numbers of young people who had less than a matric, because often it is more difficult for them to try and understand what potential pathways and trajectories are available to them. Our assumption is that it might be easier for young people with a matric or some post-school education or training to see the benefit of a coaching trajectory, but that is something that we really would need to dig into a little bit deeper still. We also see that 75% of those who complete the pre-session 1 survey have been looking for work, for earning or learning opportunities in the month prior to starting the journey. There we go. That doesn't mean, for a while we thought, well, does that mean that we are potentially not reaching the most vulnerable young people? But when we then look at what these young people respond to us in terms of their financial security, we see that 50% of them, or almost 50% of them, indicate that their caregiver or themselves have just enough money to get by, and over 26%, just over 26%, indicate that they either do not have any money or they only have just enough money and sometimes go skipping meals and don't pay their bills. So we are actually looking at a significant vulnerability profile among the young people that take up the coaching journey. Next slide, please, Lauren. So what do we know about how young people are doing once they start taking up the coaching journey? The data that is shown on the screen here is for those young people who have completed both the pre-session 1 survey and the post-session 3 survey. So the coaching approach consists of 3 to 4 relatively structured coaching sessions, and we'll talk a little bit later on about how that doesn't capture the full story, because a lot of young people access many more touch points with their coaches and the site teams than those structured sessions. But we collect the data at baseline, so before them starting a session and after session 3, which is where they complete their action plan. The blue graphs and the blue numbers that you see there indicate what they responded before taking up the coaching journey. The green indicates the shift for that same cohort of young people after having completed 3 sessions. The Cantrell's ladder is one mechanism of trying to understand how a young person feels about their life at a particular point in time. It asks a person to rate their position in life at this point in time. So where would you say you are in life right now? And it asks them to indicate that on a ladder, with the lowest ranks being the lowest position in life and the highest, obviously, the higher ones. We see that over 54% of young people indicated being in the lowest quadrant of that ladder at pre-session 1. And really what you want to see is a decrease in those blue bars, a decrease on the left-hand side and an increase on the right-hand side. We see significant shifts there from in the proportions of young people indicating they were feeling at the lowest levels in life now, compared to after session 3, where we see increases in those middle and the top tiers of the ladder. Next slide, please, Lauren. We ask young people whether they feel they have a sense of being supported. Remember, one of the outcomes we wanted to see was young people feeling more supported. Response options there range on the left-hand side from I feel disconnected from the people around me and I am isolated and alone, to on the right-hand side, most of the time I feel connected to the people around me, or I consistently feel connected to the people around me. Again, what you want to see is a shift from the left to the right, and that's exactly what we're seeing. 17% going down to 8% of young people indicating that they really feel unsupported, and an increase to that middle level there, and a stable situation on the right-hand side. Can you show the next one, please, Lauren? We also ask young people whether they feel they have access to peer support resources. On the left-hand side, response options there range from I don't have any friends, and I would like to have friends, but it's hard for me, to on the right-hand side, I have reliable and consistent friends who have my best interest in mind. And we see, again, significant shifts down from the most dire situations for young people up to feeling more supported. So we see an increase there from 56% to 65% of young people indicating that they have access to peer support resources. What was really incredible when we started seeing these graphs and these stats coming through was that we had the qualitative data a little bit before the quantitative data, and it was really incredible to see the two align. So what we hear from young people across all of the sites, no matter what round of interviews we conduct with them, is that many of them absolutely didn't know where they were going in life. As that first young woman up there from Atlantis tells us, I didn't know where I was going in life, what I was going to do. I didn't know where to start. It was a whole blank page for me. Another young woman told us, before I met BPS, I would be at home, just like in my bed now. And the program is actually a thing for me to get up in the morning. It gets me excited. We're applying at colleges now, so I've been getting here every day. We must get it done. Cato Manor, so that's our youngest site. Well, no, not quite the youngest. There is a more recent born one, but it's still a very young one, only about half a year. The Cato Manor site. One young man telling us, before I got here, the way I was feeling, I didn't think I can do anything progressive about my life. Even if he would have access to information, I tried, but I had no information on how I can find certain things like applications. I did try, but nothing worked. A young woman in Orange Farm tells us there wasn't any movement in my life. There was no one to talk to. And a young man in Orange Farm tells us all these years I was lost. I was living, but not knowing the purpose of living up until I found this program called BPS. Next slide, please, Lauren. So continuing on outcome 1, we also ask young people a number of questions that tries to assess how they are doing in terms of mental health. This first question here about feelings about self range on the left-hand side from options such as I can't do anything right, and there are more things I don't like about myself than that I do like about myself, to on the right-hand side, I feel good about who I am and I am confident in myself. And again, we see those left graphs decreasing and the right ones increasing. So that's exactly what we had hoped we would see. Next one, Lauren. The GAD2 is a measure, an instrument aimed at measuring generalized anxiety disorder in a population. What we see there is pre-session 2. So the blue indicates that there is no further evaluation needed. The green indicates where there is a possible generalized anxiety disorder in the person who has completed the survey, and that would then flag to the coaches that they would need to evaluate further and understand more of what is going on among young people. And again, we see pre-session 1 is the graph on the left, post-session 1 is the graph on the right. We see an increase in those who do not need further evaluations and a decrease in possible generalized anxiety disorder. What the coaches tell us is that even when young people do not necessarily show up as having potentially generalized anxiety disorder, they pick up on incredibly high levels of anxiety and mental ill health throughout the sessions. So it takes young people a while to actually confide in their coaches on how they are really doing and what kind of supports they really need. But again, as I said, what we see there is a significant change pre-session 1 to post-session 3. And again, this aligns very much with the qualitative data we've collected across the sites. I don't think that some of these outcomes were necessarily the ones we would have foreseen. We pick up on things as depression and anxiety, but we also pick up on many interpersonal difficulties that young people feel they are much better at dealing with as time goes by and they engage with their coaches. And some young people, again, you can read the quotes here, will tell us, before the BPS, I was very depressed. I couldn't do anything by myself. Whatever I was trying wouldn't work out for my good. A young person in Orange Farm tells us most of the time I was feeling small. When you talk to me, I was feeling angry. I was like a heavy man with depression. A young woman in Cato Manor tells us I was feeling lonely, wounded, as if I'm abandoned because of some of the trials I was facing in my life. A young man in Katamana tells us, and this is really interesting because this is a young man who actually took up a job opportunity and continues to come to the site and tells us, I will come here before I go to work just to talk to her, that's his coach, and I would leave for work feeling like, you know, optimistic. And I'd say, hey, I can take this. The stuff like that. The coaching helps me cope and feel more optimistic. Next slide, please, Lauren. So these questions continue, right? We ask a range of these questions around how well do you feel you are able to handle stress and emotions? And again, on the left-hand side, the response options range from I'm constantly overwhelmed by my stress and emotions, I often feel stressed and emotional and I don't know what to do about it, to on the right-hand side, I consistently use healthy ways to handle my stress and emotions. We see a shift, and this is quite an interesting one. We see a shift there from the worst ways of dealing with stress and emotions, but also from the highest ranks down to that middle rank. And let me tell you, the third rank, the third answering option there is, I am learning how to deal with my stress and emotions. This is very much in line also with what the coaches pick up among some young people, and that is the sense that they have had to learn to do it on themselves. So their assumption is they know how to deal with stress and emotions, and they're doing this. And then there's a bit of a recalibration after a couple of sessions where they realize actually there are other ways, potentially healthier ways of dealing with stress and emotions, and I'm learning how to do that. Next one, Lauren. How often do you ask for help when you are upset and overwhelmed? This is an important question because we realize that many young people will drop out of opportunities because they feel upset and overwhelmed and don't necessarily ask for help. And so we really want to see this this behavior of asking for help and knowing when to turn to someone for help. We really want to see that increase. Response options on the left-hand side, they range from no one can help me when I'm upset and overwhelmed, I don't ask for help when I'm stressed or overwhelmed, to on the right-hand side, when I feel upset or overwhelmed, I consistently ask for help and receive it from those who care about me. And again, we see a decrease on the left and an increase on the right, supported by the qualitative data. Again, we can see young people, and this it takes them time to get to these realizations and to be able to express this. I was always running away from challenges. So when I faced them, that's when I became aware that in life you have to face your challenges in order to be stronger. It has shifted a lot of fear and anxiety, it being engaging with the coaching. That's a young woman from Orange Farm. Another young woman in Orange Farm tells us, I felt like I needed to talk to someone because at that time I felt I had a lot of anger. I didn't know how to express my feelings towards anyone and I hated people. We see this coming out of the qualitative data a lot, this inability to, prior to starting the coaching, knowing how to actually engage with people around them. Another young woman, a young man, in Katamana tells us, I will continue to try until I get something. Even when I'm not okay, I will come to BPS and maybe talk to someone. And a young man in Atlantis told us BPS was a place of recovery. At the end of the day, when it's said and done, I'm going to achieve what I want. So thank you, BPS. Okay, Lauren, over to you.
Yeah. I'm going to be looking at outcome 2, which is around young people having access to services that help them overcome barriers. So in one of our questions, we have a scale where we ask them, do you have access to services and resources in your community? And you can see that it goes from I don't go to any services in my community because I know I won't be helped, through to there are a variety of services in my community that are helpful. And you can see quite a stark shift there where just under 26% of people were answering that they don't go into any of services because they know they won't be helped. That drops all the way down to just under 7%. And you can see that steady increase in the green blocks as you move to the right. That has partly to do, if we look at the qualitative data, because the coaching process is helping them to understand what services are out there and what they need in order to access those services. And so we also think that this might start to indicate to us that this is also the community of practice working, and that we don't have concrete evidence on that. At the moment, what the qualitative data is showing us is that it's because they're becoming more aware of the services and are being supported to understand how best to access those services. So this is from a young man in Atlantis, who says, I also was that kid who didn't know what to take in all the documents, but now I know all the documents. And that, for me, that is the basic package, support package, because now I'm packed with things that can help me further. And a young man in Cato Manor, when I got to this program, it became much easier because anything we needed would be posted on the group, including learnerships. My main struggle was applications. For example, if there was a post, I was not able to apply on my own because I didn't know what was needed. And then a young woman in Atlanta said, I was like, wow, because I never knew what opportunities there were in Atlantis. And another young man in Atlantis who says, for instance, if I want to apply now for my license, I know this is where I need to go and get the training I need. So it's really about increasing the access to information, not just about what services are there, but about how to access them. And the community of practice plays a role in that, because when the site teams gather the service providers, those service providers are sharing the information with the site teams, guiding the coaches about, we see this problem, make sure they know this, to bring this and that. And that just helps smooth that process of accessing services and reducing the costs of accessing those services so that young people don't have to come back multiple times. If we look at outcome 3, which is young people connecting to learning and earning opportunities, and importantly, sticking with them, which is a really important indicator for us. So we do want to keep tracking this over time. What we can see is that as young people continue with the coaching, more and more of them begin to access learning and earning opportunities. So this is the percentage of young people who are still neat after each coaching opportunity. And you can see after each opportunity that steadily declines. What we do see is that young people often come in and their immediate priority is they need some kind of income earning opportunity, whether that's a part-time job or an EPWP opportunity or a stipended volunteer opportunity, but that doesn't mean that that's the end point for them. They're still coming back and then looking for what is the next step in their process. And so this partly represents young people who've taken up opportunities and gone off and have paused on their coaching, but also young people who've taken up opportunities and continued with their coaching. It's important here to explain that we don't only count employment opportunities. We look at whether they've taken up a learning opportunity, an earning opportunity, or both. And that's quite nicely illustrated in this quote from a young man in Atlantis. He says, I did my N1 and N2, but my brother, the breadwinner in my house, moved and there was no more breadwinner. My mother was determined for me to go on and finish my N, but then I didn't want to go on because my family was struggling and I have the ability to provide for them. So I didn't know what to do. My coach asked me, can you get a weekend job? And I'm like, why didn't I think of that? If I can get the weekend job, I can pay for my traveling, because when my brother left, we didn't have money to pay for my traveling and it was quite expensive. But now I'm convinced, because I looked and if I stop, I cannot go further. So I need to go. So the next thing was, okay, we're going to get that weekend job. And just a few weeks into college, I got a phone call and then I got the job. So you can see that he's got the job now, but he hasn't dropped out of his learning opportunity. He's continuing with that learning opportunity towards a longer term trajectory. It is also important to point out that this seems to suggest that the more a young person connects with the coaches, the more likely they are to connect with opportunities. We do also see here that young people do need to go through a couple of coaching opportunities. There's some that go through one and will be able to be on their way, but there's quite a few who need that longer term connection before they're able to connect to an opportunity. And that also is borne out in some of our other data about the intensity of support that Ariane will talk to in a moment. I think what's important is this question of sticking with those opportunities. So there's 2 quotes on the right-hand side from 2 BPS beneficiaries at Orange Farm who talk about challenges they faced in an opportunity that they were engaged in and how the coaching helped them to stick with it. So one of them says there was a time where our admin, the admin at the opportunity she'd taken up, discouraged me and said I should quit the program. I was really helpless and discouraged, but my coach was there to help me see the reason I was here in the first place and get me to focus and help me with who to go to when I have those kinds of problems. Another one says, when I started my training, I got sexually harassed by a colleague and it made things really difficult for me. But thanks to my coach, I found ways to deal with it. At some point, I wanted to quit the program because of all the judgment and comments that my colleagues were making, but my coach didn't let me. She helped me deal with all the negativity and supported with every decision I made. I'm really grateful to BPS because if it wasn't for them, I would have quit the program and stayed at home. And then some more work that we need to do is to talk to opportunity holders and employers about what they're seeing, but we're starting to get some feedback through the community of practice. This was one learnership provider in Orange Farm who said BPS was key in ensuring that suitable trainees were attracted and ultimately enrolled into the program. So part of the success of sticking with it is that we're not just placing any young person into any opportunity, but it's around finding the right fit for that young person. So that's part of what helps with the sticking with it. But he then says this was further complemented through constant coaching sessions with the BPS team where learners were provided with holistic support. This resulted in retaining almost all 20 learners, with the exception of the 3 who got employment opportunities. This has been one of the sustainability elements that the city, and in this case, it's the city of Johannesburg, and possibly other skills training centers have been grappling to get right. I'm going to hand back to Ariane now.
Thanks so much, Lauren. I think us talking through these outcomes, the numbers and the narratives, I think what's perhaps difficult to appreciate is the importance of this personal approach and of the intensity of support that we see is needed for young people. We've seen in some of the numbers that Lauren presented earlier, young people don't necessarily believe in the services that are available to them or trust them or know what services are available and what opportunities are available. But we also know that this is part of a long experience of them trying to access opportunities and services, and that long-term exclusion and disappointment that then ultimately has led to lower levels of self-esteem and higher levels of emotional distress. So what we see, and we see this coming back in all the aspects of the program, the personal engagement has been crucial, even just from the get-go, to try and activate young people into the program. The mobilizers are our feet on the street. They're young people who go out into the communities and reach out to young people who are not in education, employment, or training, and explain to them that there is such a thing as a basic package of support in the community that can help them. We see that that is our main source of bringing young people through the door, followed by walk-ins. And this picture was slightly different when we presented this last time, because what we see is that walk-ins increase over time, that as soon as young people begin to pick up word of mouth and hear from other young people and other organizations that basic package of support is providing exactly that support, walk-ins increase. Others is often referrals through other organizations that will have sent a young person to come and find out what is going on. Because we want to include a level of objectivity in announcing the fact that basic package of support is there, so we don't only want to rely on young people who reach out to other young people or who spread the word, we also announce basic package of support as an opportunity in the communities on sayouth.mobi. So that's the National Pathway Manager that is accessible and available to young people who have access to who are registered on the platform. It's been an interesting journey to see how young people in different communities react entirely differently to those digital announcements. In Orange Farm, the site was inundated within a couple of days of young people responding to the online advertisement of basic package of support, whereas in Atlantis and Cato Manor, the uptake or the interest expressed via sayouth.mobi was much lower and much slower. So there's definitely something about the ways in which young people engage with digital information that is quite context specific and that has a different energy to it in the different sites. What we see is that that intensive engagement and that personal approach remains important along the journey of young people with basic package of support. So what you see there on the right-hand side is just a screenshot of indicators that we reported against the Innovation Fund grant, which is not the same duration as the one that we've been talking about for the other data we've shown. This is the report on the 12-month running of the Innovation Fund grant. You see we reported on projected numbers of young people who we assumed would come through the door, and the number of services we assumed young people would take up, and then the actual uptake of services. That incredible number there of 2,731 services provided refers to the intensity of the site teams engaging with these young people. I mentioned earlier, they go far beyond the 3 to 4 structured coaching sessions. There are an enormous number of in-between touch points where young people will reach out to their coaches or the mobilizers or the site team manager via WhatsApp, or popping into the office, or coming to see someone quickly, even while they are at an opportunity or in line for an interview that is causing them distress or anxiety. They will reach out and be in touch. So that number really, again, brings home the point that this intensity of personal engagement is really important, but it's also a difficult one. It often goes unrecognized because it's, as we're often told, difficult to scale, because it requires high intensity, high resources, highly skilled people, and highly committed people. I think that is a point that really has to be made, is that the coaches and the site teams are incredible in their commitment to young people. Next slide, Lauren. What this also means, and I think that has very much been a hidden dimension in the work until now, is that the intensity of support required by young people places an incredibly heavy burden on those who are providing the care, the coaches themselves and the site teams themselves, to the extent that we've had to, as basic package of support, look into how to provide additional support that would care for the carers. We reached out to ICAS, which is a mental health care provider, a wellness provider that can be accessed either via a live chat, face-to-face engagements in a clinical setting, telephonic counseling, or on-site counseling. And again, there we see that the more face-to-face engagement sees higher uptakes also among the staff and the carers. This is a message that is absolutely crucial, we believe, to bring to partners and to funders. Really what we're dealing with is kind of the rebuilding and the redress of decades and generations of deprivation and exclusion that has continued to run over generations, and that is really too difficult to carry, even by well-trained, well-supported child and youth care workers who provide this coaching, and by the site teams. It's an aspect we've had to, as I said, insource, and we really do need to continue to fundraise for, because if we can't support our site teams, we can't really support the young people who are coming through the door. Okay, Lauren. So I think that this is still one of my slides here. What have been some of the challenges? So as we indicated, we have definitely been able to bring young people through the door who have a significant vulnerability profile, but it feels like there is an additional group of young people still out there who are potentially even more disconnected and discouraged, with lower levels of education and potentially higher levels of income poverty that we haven't necessarily managed to reach, which is a concern, because if it takes this much engagement with young people who are slightly less vulnerable, then exactly what would we need to offer to ensure that that is a group of young people that doesn't fall through the cracks? Coaching, as we said, involves intensive support for young people over extended periods of time, but what we see is that for many who walk through the door, the immediate need is getting an income. The levels of deprivation are that dire, even among this cohort, that for many of them, the immediate focus is how can I earn money? While the aim of the program then is to make sure that while we solve for that immediate problem, we also try to work with young people to remain a focus on a longer term trajectory that would ultimately put them in a stronger position to engage with the labor market and livelihood aspects. As I pointed out earlier, the implementation model is, as it is at the moment, quite thin in that it kind of expects a site team to be able to support the young people who come through the door and refer them to the necessary services in the environment. But what we see is that those services in the environment are themselves quite stretched and therefore cannot always offer the additional support that is needed, and that the coaches themselves face multiple challenges in their personal lives, but are also very often triggered by the kinds of challenges that young people are bringing through the door. And therefore, we really would need to think about how we kind of layer this kind of support around not only young people, but also the team and the services within a community. How do we build it all stronger? There's an absolute difficulty that we've run into in terms of this approach to implementation research, and that is how to think quite carefully about gathering data at what point in time so that we don't interfere with the intervention itself, but that we also do gather proper baseline data and we continue to track young people over extended periods of time. It's always been difficult to track young people over extended periods of time, but once young people take up an opportunity, we need to think quite carefully about how we continue to reach out to them. The coaches do, the mobilizers do, but they may at that point not necessarily be completing any surveys, because we planned the survey to happen post session 3. So we do just need to think quite carefully about how we gather data over extended periods of time. I think that is it. We would like to finish off with a quick documentary that was supported by one of our funders, UNICEF. There are various videos available on young people in Atlantis and in Orange Farm. The Orange Farm ones were supported by our UJ colleagues and other funders. It's always difficult to choose one, but we've chosen the one from Atlantis. This one. Go ahead, Lauren.
From a young age, I was living by my grandma. As a kid, you know, I was always in trouble. I was violent, I was rude towards my teachers, you know, I never had respect because I never had support in my life. On school, I was always called names, I was always bullied, you know. My teachers would also break me down, calling me a disgrace, calling me whatever they feel like fits me. They didn't have the patience to understand me, to see what I am actually going through. Here at BPS, they believe in me, they see my potential, they want us to win, they help us with our CVs. We are open to them, and you know how nice it feels to just open to someone about something small or whatever the case may be. It's nice. When I opened up, I felt like it's the best thing I ever done. They helped me reach and tap into the thing I love most. So at the moment, I'm training models, kids at the grooming school. Training others is my passion. Because like, it will be selfish of me to keep all the things that I know to myself. If you see a kid with potential, show him the proper way. So when I'm training others, I feel amazing. I feel inspired by them. 1, 2, 3, let's go. I want to have my own studio one day. I want to fly to Milan. I want to model in Milan Fashion Week. I want to have my own fashion school. Honestly, I just want to make the most out of Atlantis, you know. Coming from nothing motivates me. As soon as you see the people that is rooting for you, the people that's actually trying to give a hand out to lift you up. Well done. As soon as you see that, you see life.
I think it's important to add that Shastri, whose story you just saw, is actually in Europe, Milan and Germany, modeling. should you
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ariane and Lauren, for the presentation. Simone and Tabileng for answering the questions in the chat. I think most of the questions have been answered. Details about how to connect with the team has been provided. The presentation will be posted to everybody, as well as the audio link. I think all of you would agree with me. What has been shared here this morning has been thought-provoking, but also sobering. In this climate where we all want instant solutions, and we want it, you know, yesterday, and we want to scale everything. I think in what I've heard here this morning, what I take away is that when you're wanting to have a conversation about youth, when you're wanting to intervene in a meaningful way, then there is no alternative but to adopt a holistic approach. There is no alternative but to appreciate that it takes time to build trust. It takes time to build resilience in our young people. And so when we talk about scale, scaling for youth is scaling deep. It is scaling at an individual person level. And I think that, you know, as a funder, it is important to understand that. Funders come with mandates. And in those mandates, they want to have impact. And for them, impact is often about the numbers, right? We've reached 2 million people. We've reached 500,000 people. Well, in reaching those people, how deep was the impact really? How much did you actually shift the dial? You might have connected that person with an opportunity, but because of the multiple deprivations that this team has spoken about, somewhere along the line, there might be a root cause why that young person actually does not stay, you know, with that opportunity, whether it be in education or whether it be in a job. And so if we continue to ignore the fact that if we want to be successful and truly impactful in supporting young people, we have to be patient. We have to invest for the long term. It cannot be that we want to have a soundbite, to have an announcement that, you know, we've reached 5 million people. It is not about that. Supporting young people is not about politicking. It is about actually making a meaningful impact by staying the course, understanding the root cause. And this is what this team is doing. It is demonstrating how the rigor of academic research can be applied to real life issues. And so it allows us to pause and reflect as funders and others in this ecosystem as to how we should be making funding available, where that funding should be targeted, over what term that funding must be available, and also how we need to work together as a community who is interested in changing the lives of young people in our country. So that's just a few of my takeaways, but I'm going to open up now, and I think that the team would have, you know, unmuted you, and so by way of raising your hand, if there's a question that you would like to ask, please put up your hand, and I will try and do the best of my ability, you know, just track whose hand went up first. Perhaps, yeah, anyway. Let me just see if there are any hands, and people do help me. There was about 200 people in the session. So yes, any questions? Has everybody's questions been answered? Is there anybody who would like further clarification? I think one of the, yes, I recognize Will. Will's hand is up. So please go ahead. Will, please tell us where you're from.
Right, can you hear me? Sorry, I'm in a coffee shop, so it might be a bit noisy.
We can hear you.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I mean, I'm in tip of South Africa in Johannesburg. I make concrete wine tanks and having a tremendous issue trying to find gain employment. Everybody doesn't, it's either.
Sorry, Will, now we really can't hear you. Will?
Gosh.
Either just try and keep your mic. Yeah, keep your mic and your head steady.
Can you hear me again?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, so we are based in Johannesburg, southern tip of Cape Town, as you guys probably know. We make concrete wine tanks. We sort of startup company that's growing quite rapidly, and obviously have had tremendous issue finding employment that is capable. There always seems to be a problem, one or more problems that people come along with, you know. And we're doing a highly specialized product. So with regards to finding employment with the skills that are required, almost doesn't exist. So what we try to do now is specifically target youth. As you know, brain is super plastic when you use.
Sorry, Will, it's really difficult to hear you. So perhaps if you could just kind of hone in on the question you might have for the team.
Sure. My question, I actually put in the chat there, is just about the ETI incentive that SARS has for employing youth to offset wages against your tax burden. Because it's a fantastic way for an employer to sort of hedge their bets on employing youth over experience. Do you have anything to say about that, or any advice?
Yeah, Lauren or Ariane, do you want to respond? And then after that, I recognize Aslam Ismail. He has his hand up.
I'm happy to come in there. I've got some students who have been doing some work on the ETI, and I think it holds huge potential, particularly for small businesses and startups like you're talking about, because they do struggle more with that HR burden and trying to connect young people with training and provide that training. And I think there's more work to be done in terms of the take-up of the ETI amongst small businesses. So that's certainly a good option. But the other point I heard you talking about was struggling to find young people with the right skills. And I think one of the elements of the basic package of support that we haven't really delved into in a lot of detail here is around the community of practice work, which is about building this ecosystem in the local community that understands the role they have to play in supporting young people's transition. So the basic package of support doesn't provide skills training, for instance, but it does refer young people to available skills training opportunities in the local community. So for instance, in Atlantis, there's a strong collaboration with the local West Coast College, the TVET College there. And if there was training happening at the West Coast College that was necessary for the kinds of skills you're looking for, there's that, that community of practice that exists in Atlantis that can be leveraged, and then to bring employers in helps to then begin those conversations about what kind of skills training is needed in a particular community, where the demand is in the community, and over time to build that ecosystem of support that supports those longer term learning and earning trajectories.
Thank you, Lauren. Aslam? Oh, Ariane, did you want to come in?
No, I'm good. I think Lauren covered that.
Okay. Thank you. Aslam, you have your hand raised. Please pose your question, and then afterwards I recognize Tanya. Aslam, are you still with us? Okay, I'm not sure. I can see him, but he's not speaking. So, Tanya, do you want to go ahead?
Great, thank you very much. I just wanted a question for Ariane or Lauren. What was the feedback that you got from NGOs or other organizations that you included in your community of practice to improve access for youth to these services? Because I'm pretty sure they'd never worked in this way before. BPS came along and initiated a community of practice. I'd just really like to hear the feedback that you got from those organizations. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sure. Do you want to go first, Lauren?
Yeah, I think there's a whole webinar that we need to do on the community of practice work. And Tanya, I know you're also running communities of practice, so in child wellbeing. So there's probably shared lessons. And yeah, I think it's very different in different communities. So when we start going into work in a particular community, there's a scoping phase that we go through where we work very closely with community stakeholders to try and understand who the key role players are in the community, what their thoughts are on the basic package of support, mapping who what services are there, and really trying to listen to what the needs are and the culture and the politics of a community before we go into a community. And I think that that's crucial in a crucial building block in building a community of practice. We have had, what we have learned is that work of bringing people together, collaborative problem solving takes a long time. I think many organizations are used to working in silos and in competition to one another, particularly where funding is restricted. And so overcoming those barriers takes a long time of constant engagement between the site manager and the different service providers in the community, including the NGOs. And yeah, what we have seen is in Atlantis, for instance, our community of practice is quite small, but very, very active. In Orange Farm, we've had a much bigger community of practice. And in Orange Farm, there's a strong culture of forums, for instance. And a community of practice is quite different to a forum. So trying to shift it from we're just meeting once a month to we're actually working together and doing things together has been quite difficult there. We've had to have smaller working groups as a strategy there. So it really is, there's no one size fits all in this community of practice work. It's really becoming culturally sensitive, community sensitive, working in an iterative way where we're learning about what's working and what's not working over time, but keeping that vision of that collaborative problem solving. And over time, we've seen some of the partners that fall away, but a lot of the partners who do see the success and who do see the value, and then they some of them come on later in the process, and that they really do want to be part of that. So part of it is about demonstrating the successes as well to get people to buy in. I'm not sure if Ariane or Simone have other insights though.
No,
Thank
again,
you.
I think you've said it, Lauren. It really is quite context specific, is what we are learning, and it also is quite a sensitive. It isn't so much about coming into a community and saying, and now here is BPS running a community of practice. Actually, there are several kinds of engagements already happening between existing organizations in a community. And it really is about thinking quite carefully and together with existing organizations and platforms, what a good place would be to begin to build a connection. And as Lauren says, it unfolds differently in different communities, and it takes time because in essence, again, it is about rebuilding a fabric of collaboration and support that hasn't necessarily been supported over the past decades.
Thanks, Ariane. Simone, would you like to come in as well?
No, I think it's been largely covered. I think just to say that, just to perhaps emphasize that we have seen the communities of practice roll out very differently in the different communities. And so how NPOs in one community engage with it is quite different. There really isn't a kind of standard way in which organizations engage, although there is a kind of standardized approach that's implemented across the sites. It actually does all happen quite uniquely, which has been really fascinating to see.
Okay, thank you very much. I see Andani. Would you like to come in with your question?
Thank you. Can you hear me? I'm audible.
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. I'm Andani from the University of Pretoria in Gauteng. So I would like to first by thanking you for your presentation and the wonderful work that you are doing. So I just have a question. So I'm running one of the projects which we got an approval from the University of Pretoria on ethics approval. So I'm running a project called Adolescence Health, which is basically doing the similar work what you're doing, but we are not taking it as a research project. We are taking it as a community development project, which we are uplifting the adolescents from different communities. For instance, we have started with the community in Atteridgeville in Pretoria. So what I need to ask is that, do you collaborate with such studies in terms of collaboration? If maybe we have similar issues that we are facing on those communities in Atteridgeville, can we refer some of the adolescents to you? But I didn't see any areas around Pretoria that you have covered already. But I'm just asking if maybe in future you have something in mind, seeing that you have to cover Pretoria or Tshwane, city of Tshwane. Do you collaborate with such studies if we need to refer adolescents to you guys to support them mentally, because this mental health is a big challenge that we are really facing now in terms of what we have collected so far. So another question is about funding. Do you have funding for such projects? Because I'm just a young researcher. We have started researching, and the most challenging thing that I'm facing now is funding in terms of resources, and maybe people will be collecting data and interacting with the adolescents. So the question is, do you have funding for that? Thank you. I hope my question was not too long.
Thank you, Andani. Lauren, you're going to go?
Yeah, so I think as you can see from the slide we shared about all the collaborating partners, that the BPS is definitely a collaborative effort. The challenge, of course, is that we have these 6 sites that are running at the moment, and the capacity to scale up to other areas. There's always a strong request whenever we present of, can we run this in this area or that area or the next area. And you can see that the intensity of support means that it does take quite a lot to set up a new site in a new area, and a lot of efforts to funding and training new teams, etc. We are in a process in the next 2.5 to 3 years of looking at what our strategies are for replicating the model. We're not in a place right now to be replicating the model necessarily. But what we can do certainly is collaborate on the lessons. So if you would like to reach out, our contact details are on the slides that will be shared after this. But certainly from a learning point of view, we would be happy to collaborate on that basis. But in terms of referring young people to the services, that would be very difficult given the distance between Tshwane and Orange Farm at this stage. But yeah, as I said, in the next while, we're working closely with DGMT to be looking at what are our models for being able to replicate this in different ways. Sim, I'm not sure if you've got anything you want to add to that.
No, you covered everything.
And in terms of funding, I don't have any answers. It's a constant process of writing funding proposals.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm just going to check, and I see Aslam's hand is still up. I'm not sure whether he's found his microphone. Aslam, do you want to come in? No, I don't think. But Bongani, you have your hand up too.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes.
Okay, yes. So apologies, I've just got tonsillitis, so my voice is not audible. So I am from the organization Yes Youth Employment Service. So we actually do have a hub in Alexandra, and we ran a previous Jobs Fund project. And now what I just wanted to find out was that when we're running the project, I think most of the issues that have been identified in the BPS findings were actually key and aspects that we actually needed, and we ended up partnering with another organization just to help the youth. Now, what I just wanted to find out is is that, you know, where are you located in Alexandra, so that when we actually have the youth next time, we can either refer them to you or we can collaborate and maybe we work together in ensuring that, you know, these youth are supported as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. The work that we did in Alex was in partnership with Amandla Edu Football at the Safe Hub there, and it's a partnership that we are currently reviewing. It was a partnership that we went into during the Innovation Fund. It was part of the process of testing what routes there could be for replicating the basic package of support through a partnership model. And we can, you know, we're in the process of figuring out what the next steps are with that. So we can certainly keep you updated on that. And probably Simone is the right person to connect with on that going forward.
Thank you, Lauren. I do not see any other hands, but I did want to ask you, either yourself, Ariane, Simone, I mean, you know, we spoke about the importance of this continued support and being available, right? So could you just share with us why you feel continued support and loopback options are so important in this space?
I'm happy to go, and the others can jump in. We see when we look at both the quantitative and the qualitative data around how young people are engaging with opportunities across the country, that there's a huge amount of churn in them connecting and taking up opportunities and then not necessarily completing an opportunity or not necessarily connecting to the next opportunity once they've completed a first placement, which then ultimately means that young people kind of fall back to square one. They have to kind of start all over again to try and understand what the next best step in their journey would be. Because we want to continue to smooth the connections to opportunities, which would reduce the, I suppose, expenditure, but in very many different ways, right? Both in terms of energy, emotional well-being, and financial resources. We want to avoid young people spinning and churning and needing to figure out what the next best step is and then to drop out again. It's a waste of resources, both on the side of the opportunity holder and the young person and their families. So reaching back in a moment of crisis and knowing that there is actually a moment to just take stock, reflect, and collaboratively decide on what that next best step would be like makes a huge difference in the lives of young people. We see this play out even at the universities, where young people who are slightly less isolated than others often enroll in year one but do not complete year 3, for example, which is something we like to avoid.
I think Simone might have something to add there as well.
Yeah, I think just to add, I mean, what we've seen, I think, is when, you know, young people come through the doors with experiencing these multiple deprivations, even when they are set up on a path towards success, they are still very vulnerable to any one thing in their life going wrong and then sending them off that trajectory again. It can be a loved one getting ill, it could be a financial issue in the home, it can be a breakup with a partner. And what we've seen is for young people who come in, especially with, you know, kind of a fragile mental state, having someone to help build their sense of hope and resilience, even when they are on a path to success, is so crucial, because for them to get knocked off is actually quite easy. And so that's where we've seen, and especially for young people entering into employment opportunities where they aren't sure what to expect, when those opportunities aren't perhaps the most youth-friendly environments for young people to be working in, to ensure that they actually are able to sustain those opportunities. That ongoing support is crucial. And it doesn't necessarily entail full coaching sessions at the site. The type of support can then kind of become digital. It can become WhatsApp messages and calls and voice notes. So we see digital playing a stronger role once a trusting relationship has been established, you know, through the face-to-face coaching. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simone. As we draw to a close, there was one last hand that was raised, and I think it belonged to was it Bongani? Yes, Bongani. I'm going to give you the opportunity to ask the last question, and then I will draw the session to a close. Go ahead, Bongani.
I hope I'm audible. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are. Yes, you can.
Okay,
we can.
No, thank you very much. So the name is Bongani Mabuza from Gauteng Provincial Government in the Department of Education and Youth Development. Mine is just two things, Najwah. One, what would be the requirements to set up such a supporting or for you to have a site for support, right? What are the things that you guys need? One. Two is that I think the partnership, now that one is in Gauteng, I think, Lauren, how best can we explore a partnership with UJ on this? And I'm speaking on behalf of Gauteng from a youth development point of view. I think we can probably do something together there in terms of setting up. So yeah, the requirements and partnership, Najwah, and maybe we will come back at your door, Ms. Edries, if you are comfortable for us to navigate the jobs fact on this one. Thank you very much. It is a brilliant one.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Bongani, and thank you for volunteering and the question there. Thank you. Do you have something more to add?
Yes, thanks. No, so I was saying just part of what I wanted to share is that as a program from TAPA 1 Million has now expanded, which now starts looking at also young people that are in contravention with the law, those that have drug issues, and I like the idea of mental health. Certainly such a support program would come in handy, and we'll probably maybe have a discussion in how we start building a pipeline that links between those ones that are coming out of high school into becoming needs, because that's what happens, and how best do we start connecting those two. For me, I think it's critical. It should not always be based on the challenges they are facing, but also about let's work on them before they get to that level and see how that works. So that for me would be the partnership I would like to ask that we drive from a Gauteng point of view. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Thank you. Lauren, you want to come in?
Yeah, I think what you're getting to is what are maybe the next steps for BPS in the next couple of years. And I think our vision would be to have a BPS in every community that needs it, to have BPS in schools so that we're preventing that dropout, in TVET colleges and universities so that we're helping young people with their next steps. And of course, that takes time and a process, but it really does rely on collaboration. So similarly to the question for the person from UP and Bongani, the other Bongani from YES, I think having these conversations about how we can connect is absolutely crucial. The work that we've been doing in City of Joburg, I know City of Joburg would love to see this in all of their regions, for instance. So we can certainly have a conversation about what it takes, what those models could look like in the future, and how we can collaborate to make that happen in the future. We'd be very open to having those conversations.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. And just to Bongani, there's another intervention that we're working with as the Jobs Fund that focuses on mental health. And we can have a conversation about that. And, you know, it's about placing youth health facilitators at schools, on school premises, where young people and you know, this is even at you know, it's not just secondary school. This facility is made available, and it's an opportunity for young people to have a safe place to go to on the school premises. And, you know, so I'd be happy to have a conversation about that particular project. But let me bring the session to a close. It's been, as I said earlier, it has been thought-provoking and sobering. The work requires the passion of all of us to continue to persevere, to have the resilience, to understand that this is a journey. It is not a sprint, it is a marathon. And if we want to bring about meaningful change, then we must be committed to walk the path. We must be committed to creating partnerships. We must be committed to making available the necessary funding, and we must be committed, when we make that funding available, to understand how that funding is allocated, what the funding, which barriers those funding has to address, and how long that funding must be made available. You know, in government, we have a 3-year budget cycle, but some of these development interventions, you know, they are not 3-year interventions. They continue longer, so we also have to be creative in how we approach supporting these key interventions in our country, and how we make available holistic support to the youth of our country. So with that, I want to thank Lauren, Ariane, Simone, and Tabileng, and everybody who's just, you know, shared during this webinar, shared their experiences, asked the questions, and has empowered the rest of us to learn as those questions have been answered. So with that, thank you very much. There is hope, and that is what we all hold on to. Have a good day further, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.